Shalom, shalom. This is YAHUAH. Just want to give all praises to the Most High YAHUAH, Bahasham, Yahusha. So today's lesson, we're going to jump into a very, very important topic that I feel people don't discuss much these days. The issue of, the origins of colored people in South Africa and our true heritage. This is a very important topic that doesn't get addressed much with much facts. So today we're going to try to be as much factual as possible, and we're also going to try to, base it on the Bible as well, because the words of the Most High, you know, they are eternal. So yeah, you can see in the background, Die Kaapse Slawe. So this is basically about the slaves of the Cape, and you can't really address the history and the origin of colored people without addressing the history of slavery and the legacy of slavery in South Africa. So we're going to dive into that a little bit today. So all glory and praise to the Most High. I feel like this video I'm making is long overdue, because people really don't understand the history of colored people. Even colored people themselves don't even understand their own history. So this is really going to be an effort to edify and to bring enlightenment. So we're going to look into prophecy and show that the history of colored people are also connected to the prophecy of the Israelites going into slavery on slave ships and being scattered all over the world. So this is Deuteronomy chapter 31, verse 29, where the prophet Moses says, "For I know that after my death you will utterly corrupt yourselves and turn aside from the way which I have commanded you, and evil will befall you in the latter days." So this is the Most High prophesying, or the prophet of the Most High, Moses, prophesying and saying that in the last days great evil will befall the Israelites. And what is this evil? So here the prophet Isaiah says here in the book of Isaiah 22 and 17 to 19, "Behold, Yahweh will carry thee away with a mighty captivity, and will cover thee, and will surely violently turn and toss thee like a ball into a large country." So this is prophecy of the Most High for telling that the Israelites will go into a mighty slavery. That's mean captivity, and that means a mighty slavery. So and will be tossed like a ball, like kind of like how it speaks in Deuteronomy, the slave ships, on slave ships. So you know this is only really ever happened to one people ever in history. So we're going to prove tonight how the colored people are the actual biblical Jews, Israelites, spoken of in the Bible, that would go into slavery and be in the land of their captivity in these last days. So we're going to focus a little bit on the slaves of the Cape and their origin, and more specifically focusing on the Malagasy aspect. And many of the Malagasys and the people of the Madagascan islands are, ancient Israelites of the lost tribes of Israel that were exiled there and started their own kingdom there. We're going to also show some archaeological artifacts of some ancient shrines of with Hebrew writings in Madagascar of their royal families. So stay tuned for that. For now, we're going to jump into the historian Tariq Mullet, where he explains basically the concept of colored people being originating out of race mixing is actually more of a hoax, that and but colored people are more so descendants of slaves that were brought in here, and that only about 2.5% of the genetic makeup of so-called colored people are actually of European origin. Just take a look at this.
Most colored people will not acknowledge that they have Nguni ancestors or Sutu ancestors and so on. And I've explained how this is a reality. In fact, only 2.5%, by the way, had European ancestry. So the concept of colored people are born of misignation is actually not borne out by the facts either.
It's documented. This map of Africa was created in the 1600s by Arnoldo di Arnoldi and Matteo Florimai. Let's take a look at some of the interesting info on this map, starting with this excerpt. Being translated from Italian, the first sentence in this excerpt reads, "Some hold that Africa is so called from the Afro-descendants of Abraham, although Libya has been named by others and commonly Comisia by the Arabs." Let's take a look at the western coast of this continent. Notice how this area of the continent is labeled. It can be translated as Kingdom of the Blacks or Negroes. Also a part of this region is Timbuktu, which was a part of the Great Mali Empire. Benin is also present on this map. In the north central, we have the world's largest desert, the Sahara. We also see the Kingdom of Nubia, and to the far north, ancient Egypt. Let's also take a look at what they had to say about Madagascar. This island is called Madagascar by the inhabitants, the island of the moon. It is abundant in gold, silver, corn, sugar, saffron, cloves, rice, and millet, and it has forests of sandalwood. There are many elephants whose flesh is eaten by the inhabitants for health. Let me know what you think about this. See you next time on It's Documented.
This is Bible prophecy, Deuteronomy 28:68. And YAHUAH shall bring thee into Egypt again with ships, by way whereof I spake unto thee, thou shalt see it no more again. And there you shall be sold unto your enemies for bondmen and bondwomen, and no man shall buy you. Egypt again is literally referring to bondage. Scripture also says that Egypt is the house of bondage.
And they actually started getting slave boats. That was sending our people over
Okay, so then.
there. But now I want to tell you a story. Do you remember that boat with the cattle that was here, with that stench?
Yes. How
Now-
can you forget?
Now, just imagine, in that boat, there was a luxury of air conditioned still and food. Now, the boats that carried the slaves was racked and stacked. They were pushed in, and they were laying next to each other like that for months at sea.
So how were they surviving?
They weren't surviving. It was, for them, it was if 10% of all the slaves that they got survived. And our people was tossed out. And you imagine laying next to your brother or your son or your child that passed away. The
Sure.
stench. That is the pain that our people are still going through.
What the brother is bringing out is so heavy, right? Because we sit today with the trauma of 400 years of oppression and slavery. When we came here to Cape Town, or spread out through the corners of the earth on slave ships, that started shaping our future and our present day to what we are today. Losing your culture, losing your heritage, losing everything. So if you see that we are behaving in a certain way, if a colored person see another person behaving, or you angry at our mindset, the way we are behaving, it is because it is formed, or it is ingrained into our society for the way we behave. Gangs, anything, drugs, it is because we are oppressed. If a person that suffers from depression, what do they give them? Antidepressant tablets or medication, which is what? Drugs, because they are depressed. Now, if you find yourself living in the ghetto, have no job, living in the environment that we live in, around drugs, around gangs, won't you be depressed? Won't you join a gang? Well, the chances of you not joining a gang or use drugs, won't it be high because of your environment? And that was engineered over 400 years ago, since we got off the slave ships. I'm Prison Officer YAHUAH of the Israelite School of Universal Practical Knowledge. Shalom.
All praises to the Most High and to the brother for bringing out that information. Very powerful and honestly heartbreaking to think that all the things that our people have endured, all the trauma and slavery and, being put down. And, when you see how people acting crazy, in these days, we don't even understand that all this trauma and self-hatred all has a point of origin, and we've never really, as a people, sat down and reflected what happened to us and ever got a chance to digest all this generational trauma. And just wanted to bring out this part here, speaking of the Sao Joe slave ship. That was one of the first, and I wouldn't say first, but one of the few actual slave ship remains that have been discovered. So I think that is quite interesting, just to show that, these things actually did occur. And, there is hard evidence, archaeological proof for them. Most people don't even consider that the Cape was a major port, slave port on the global slave trade network. So this is just also an expert an exegesis from this book. I think it's of the voyages of the Portuguese when they came to southern Africa. And I'm personally entirely not. I am personally entirely acquainted with the Hottentot language and have taken the information upon it given here from Dr. Bleek's Comparative Grammar of South African Languages. It also goes on here. I want to read here where it says here the first chapter of Dr. Theophilus Hans Tuchohoam, the supreme being of the Khoi Khoi, is exceedingly interesting in this respect, and his conclusion drawn from the structure of the language and its vocabulary fit in most accurately with the origin of the race and its migration from northeastern Africa as given in the preceding pages. So, according to this guy's finding, when he examined the language of the Khoi people, the indigenous people that the Dutch encountered at the Cape, his conclusion is that they migrated to southern Africa from northeast Africa. That would be the region of so-called Palestine today. So I just want to show this clip of actually what the original people of the so-called Middle East or Northeast Africa look like. They still are melanated, and we do carry their resemblance. Just take a look at it.
To be Palestinian, that's a big problem. But to be a black Palestinian, I'm quite convinced it will be there, because as a black Palestinian, I am double oppressed. First of all, they oppress me as a Palestinian, you see. Secondly, they oppress me because of my color. Whenever I go around in the Israeli side, they call me Kushi. Kushi means the more they humiliate me, the more they oppress me, the more I stick to my land. Because this is my land. I'm so rooted. We are deeply rooted as Africans, as Palestinian Africans in this land.
Khan, that's heavy. There you hear it straight out of the horse's mouth that he's deeply rooted, in the land of Palestine. Actually, that is what the original people of that land look like, not these imposters or Ashkenazi Jewish people. They're imposters. They have no biblical ties to the land of Palestine. So this is here from the University of Pennsylvania on the English when they did research on the lost tribes of Israel and who they are. And here on page 641, it says, by turns, the English, the Irish, the North American Indians, and the Hottentots, we have been assured are of Hebrew descent. So this makes sense in terms of why our language, the indigenous Khoi language, resembles ancient Hebrew, so this shouldn't be a surprise. And then, when the colonizers came to colonize Africa and all around the world, they were specifically hunting out the lost tribes of Israel. Due to the Inquisition, they were against anyone that kept the laws of Moses. Like if you kept the Shabbat, if you ate kosher, you didn't eat swine, you circumcised your sons, all of those things, they would specifically hunt those tribes out and hunt them to extinction to the point, or enslave them to make us forget who we are essentially. So this is an ancient map here of southern Africa, showing it to be the land of Kafrari or Kafri. Now, here we also see that the people that were called by Leo Africanus Kafri, some believe it says here something were descended of Jews. So these people, when they came to southern Africa, they knew exactly who it were that they were enslaving and who it was that they were looking for. They didn't just randomly come upon a place and were like, oh, okay, we just know. Everything with them was done by purpose and with intent, and they knew what they were doing, So that's why they called this land Kafrari, which, in my opinion and in my studies, have led me to believe that southern Africa is actually the land of Ophir, of Kafrari, or Ofrari is actually a corruption of the word of the word Ophir.
A textbook of the origin and history, etc. of the colored people, 1841, James W. C. Pennington. Watch this. Let's zoom in. A stronger case still is to be found in the fact that the descendants of a colony of Jews originally from Judea to the coast of Africa are black. Do y'all see that? Do y'all see that?
Jaco Bashoff is hunting for the remains of the slave ship at the heart of this story. It was called the Meermin. It sailed from Madagascar in January 1766 with more than 140 enslaved people aboard. This would be its final voyage. Today, Cape Town, South Africa is a thriving city whose residents can trace their ancestry back to far-flung countries all around the Indian Ocean. However, most residents have ancestors who were brought to the Cape against their will, as slaves. Cape Town was founded in 1652 to supply food and water for the merchant ships of the Dutch East India Company, also known as the VOC. It was a company town, and the VOC wanted to keep it that way. Commerce was king.
The VOC was a commercial company, but it was also a government. It was a state within a state, if you like. It had been given the authority by the States General in the Netherlands to rule, to run law, to make treaties, to declare wars, as well as to trade. So it was much more than just a trading company. In the Cape, it had total power. It was the state, and it had the right of life and death over all of the inhabitants of the colony.
The historic documents of the VOC are held in Cape Town's provincial archives. Here, 30 miles of documents hold the secrets of life in Cape Town's slave society and why the Meermin was bringing slaves here.
They did not want a settler colony here at the Cape. They didn't want lots of immigrants coming in. That would have been expensive for them. They didn't want people to establish themselves as independent farmers. And instead, therefore, of encouraging immigrants, they turned to slave labor.
The VOC brought 63,000 people to Cape Town as slaves, beginning in 1658. They came from all around the Indian Ocean, from Eastern Africa through India to Indonesia. Slavery continued until 1838. Until then, as Cape Town expanded, its free citizens purchased slaves for domestic labor. Cape Town became a slave society. Now, their descendants want to know their history, none more so than heritage activist Lucy Campbell.
When slaves came to the Cape, their names were changed. If it was a name like Sangora or Masavana, and they arrived in Cape Town, say on February 15th or September, they would have been named September, the month when they arrived. Just like to indicate to you, there is September. Look at all these names. Thousands of them, thousands of them. Look at all the Februaries you see here. All these are names of slaves that were brought to the Cape. A lot of the people in Cape Town, I would say even the majority of the people in Cape Town, are slave descendants, whether they are white, whether they are black, or whether they are so-called colored.
By 1766, Cape Town had grown into a sizable settlement with more than 7,000 inhabitants, 2/3 of them slaves. Keeping so many people under control required constant supervision and coercion. Even the architecture of a typical Cape Town house was designed to control slaves. This is Koopman de Wet House. Now a museum, it once housed a family of 13 Europeans, the de Wet family, and their 26 slaves.
This house would have been a house of a very wealthy owner that would have had slaves. And the house was built specifically around slaves, because without slaves, they couldn't function. They couldn't function at all. So this would have been the center or the domain of the mistress of the house. The mistress of the house could watch over the slaves outside, and she could watch slaves coming up and down from the steps. This would have been almost like a web, and she would have been in the center. There would have been an eye on them at all times. Whatever they did, there was an eye on them. And the weird thing is that there was not physical control, but there was the psychological control, where the master or the mistress didn't have to use physical abuse. But the mental slavery was the psychological slavery. A slave was at the mercy of the master at all times. A master could ask anything of that slave. Brush my shoes, put on my shirt, carry this, carry that, come lay with me. They could basically ask for anything because the master owned that slave. That slave was a commodity.
The slave ship Meerman transported this commodity. Its sailors would give their tribal kings guns and gunpowder in exchange for people. On January 20th, 1766, the ship set sail from Betisboka Bay in western Madagascar. Its heading is for Cape Town. 3 crew members will play critical roles in what is about to happen. Gerrit Muller is the ship's captain. This is his first time running a slave ship. Chief Merchant Johann Krause is in charge of the VOC's cargo of slaves. Krause has been on slave journeys to Madagascar before, and so has his assistant, Olaf Ley.
The Meerman story is indeed one of the most remarkable of the whole of the period of slavery at the Cape, although it's relatively little known about both in South Africa or outside it. But what is particularly extraordinary is that we have records of that. We have the very words of the people who participated in that. The Dutch East India Company was an incredibly bureaucratic organisation and must have been hell to work for. It recorded everything.
These words were recorded when the survivors of the Meermin shipwreck were brought to Cape Town and questioned by the VOC's very own Court of Justice.
And one thing we know is that Muller was only recently appointed as a captain. He hadn't had much experience of being on a slave ship, whereas Krauser had. And all the way through the records, we see Krauser reminding Muller, who is in fact his superior, that actually he knows a lot more about how to sail a slave ship than Muller does. So Muller's authority is being rather undermined by Krauser, this younger man, but nonetheless a man who has more experience of this.
This struggle over leadership will compromise the Dutch crew. The VOC preferred to import children to work in Cape Town. They survived the voyages better than the adults and would provide more labor over the course of their lives. The average age of an imported slave was just 16. The true face of slavery can be seen in photos of children taken from Madagascar in 1868. The children were rescued when a British naval vessel intercepted the slave ship. The photos have attracted the attention of South Africa's leading human rights advocate, Archbishop Desmond Tutu.
They remind one so very much of pictures out of the Holocaust, Belsen and things of that sort. We are showing our inhumanity to one another. We have bandied about that word slavery, not always aware of just how inhumane the conditions were.
Beginning in the 15th century, slave ships took more than 12 million people out of Africa. The vast majority went to the Americas. These ships are the research subject of marine archaeologist Jaco Boshoff. If he can find the Meermin, it will be one of only a few such vessels discovered.
The important thing about it is that she was a slave vessel, and then the fact that there was a rebellion on board, and that's the main reason why she got wrecked. Also, we do not know too much about these vessels that the Dutch East India Company used at the Cape for slavery.
This coastline is called the Graveyard of Shipwrecks. More than 200 boats lie buried here. The lack of oxygen under the seabed should preserve the Meermin wreck. But where is it?
We know that the Meermin does not have a lot of material left on it because a lot of it was taken off at the time when she wrecked. So it is a bit like finding a needle in a haystack underwater and under sand.
The most effective way to find it is by locating any iron-based artifacts that went down with the wooden ship. This crop duster is equipped with highly sensitive magnetometry sensors, which can penetrate through ocean water and beach sand. If any iron remains of the Meermin are here, they will leave a magnetic trace.
We're very fortunate in the fact that we've got this ship's plan of the Meermin, which we found was in the Scheepvaart Museum in Amsterdam. It will guide us towards what the size of the vessel was, how wide it was, how many ribs did it have. A vessel like this, obviously made largely out of timber, would have used oak. So oak is something that we're looking for. And then the fastenings would have been metal, would have been iron. So there's a lot of iron there, and that's what we're hoping to pick up with the magnetometer.
In the end, it will be the slaves who determine the fate of the Meermin. Their chains do not prevent them from choosing leaders for their rebellion. Even before the ship sets sail, one man leads an escape attempt, but fails. His name is Masavana. He is from the village of Tulier in western Madagascar. He has many supporters, including a strong fighter named Kosage. Kosage's experience on board the Meermin was later recorded in detail by the VOC. Now, Lucy Campbell wants to read this first-hand account of a free man turned slave.
Now, I gather you want to know about Masavana, what we can find out about him. What is really exciting is that here we have the cross-examination of Masavana at his trial. And here he is, Masavana from Madagascar, age about 26 years old. So we know that he was 26. And he's asked questions about what happened on board the ship, but also he gives details about how he came to be sold as a slave.
My name is Masavana. I was asked...
Is Abashas in Israel.
Vous passez au Cameroun.
You go to Cameroon.
Vous allez trouver Yaoundé.
You find the Yaoundé.
Qui est Yehudi.
Who is a Yehudi in Hebrew.
Et vous trouvez Bamileke.
You find the Bamileke.
Qui est Amoleket.
Who's from Hebrew word Amoleke.
Qui est Bassa.
You find the Bassa.
Qui est aussi Bassa en Israël.
Who's mean Bassa also in Israel.
Douala Mangabel. Donc,
you find the Douala Mangabel.
Qui est Judas Maccabée.
Who is the Judah Maccabee.
Nous allons au Gabon.
You go to Gabon.
Vous allez trouver le mot Gabon vient du Gabaon.
The word Gabon came from Hebrew word Gabaon.
Donc les Gabonais aussi, les anciens Gabonais l'appelaient Gabon aussi.
People from Gabon used to call that Gabon also, their country also.
Bateke.
You have a Bateke.
Qui est en Israël, et Tekoa, qui est une tribu bien connue en Israël.
Also from the Hebrew word Ben Tekoa was a tribe was well known in Israel.
Et nous allons au Congo.
We go to Congo.
Vous voyez le nom Kinshasa.
You have a word Kinshasa.
Kinshasa, c'est un nom qui vient de Kushaja, qui est l'ancien nom de Kinshasa.
Kinshasa came from the word Ishasha.
Kushaja.
Kushaja.
Au chapitre 1er du verset de Chroniques au verset 15-17.
You find that word in First Chronicle 15-17.
Donc les anciens peuples qui habitaient Kinshasa l'appelaient Kushaj.
The people who used to live in Kinshasa, the first people who used to live in Kinshasa, they used to call it Kushaj.
Et toutes les communes de cette ville portent des noms bibliques.
All the name, you find all the name on this the Kinshasa city, you find all of them is we found their name in the Bible.
Vous voyez Maluku.
You say Maluku.
Qui est Malouk.
Qui est Malouk.
Meliku.
Qui est Meluku.
Vous voyez Nsele.
You see Nsele.
Qui est Nsele.
Qui est Nsele.
Vous voyez Metete.
You see Matete.
Qui est Metitia.
Qui est Metitia.
Vous voyez Selembao.
You see Selembao.
Qui est Selemiao.
Who is from Selemia?
En hébreu.
In Hebrew.
Vous voyez Gaba qui est Gabao.
You see Gaba, who is a Gabao.
Vous voyez Beninou.
You see Beninou.
Qui est Beninou aussi en hébreu.
Who is Beninou in Hebrew also.
Vous voyez Koutou qui est Kout.
You see Koutou, who is a Kout in Hebrew.
Vous voyez Mouchi qui est Mouchi aussi en hébreu.
You see Mushi, who is Mushi also in Hebrew.
Vous voyez Tchela.
You see Chela.
Qui est Tchela aussi, là où Saül a été intronisé comme roi.
You see Chela in Hebrew also is the same place that they brought Solomon, they anointing Solomon as a king.
Vous voyez Luozi qui est Luozi en hébreu.
You see Luozi, who's Luozi also in Hebrew.
Vous voyez Mbandaka qui est Manaka en hébreu.
You see Mbandaka, who's Manaka in Hebrew.
Donc les Congolais appellent aussi Manaka.
Congo people call also Manaka, are the same Mbandaka.
Le Ituri.
You see Ituri.
Qui est Ituri aussi en hébreu.
Who's Ituri also in Hebrew.
Vous voyez Isiro qui est Itiro en hébreu.
You see Isiro, who is Ichiro in Hebrew.
Kindu qui est Kindu aussi en hébreu.
Kindu, who is Kindu also in Hebrew.
Baraka qui est Baraka en hébreu.
Baraka, who is Beraka in Hebrew.
Ethiopia for over 2 millennia, they practice a literal pre-Talmudic Judaism, strictly observing the laws of Deuteronomy, including circumcision, the Sabbath, holidays, and dietary laws. For over 1,000 years, they ruled most of Ethiopia, preserving their independence longer than the ancient kingdoms of Israel. Their golden age came to an end. In the 17th century, they were defeated by Christians and given a choice: to convert or forever be falasha, exiles. The Jews resisted. Many were killed. Others were forcibly converted. All lost their land. For centuries, they lived as tenant farmers, maligned as evil eyes, and restricted to outcast occupations such as metalworking. The isolated falashas believed they were the last remaining Jews on earth.
They are meeting on what the prince believes is ancient Jewish holy ground.
Eh ben oui, premièrement, comment je vous appelle?
Je suis le prince docteur Dinara Baruch, le chef de la maison royale de Madagascar.
Bien.
Nous sommes donc des descendants d'Israël, de Jacob, et nos ancêtres sont arrivés ici à Madagascar depuis l'époque du roi Salomon.
Ah bon?
Et qui sont venus ici à Madagascar pour prendre les pierres précieuses, les bois de rose, bois d'ébène, bois de santal, pour la construction du premier temple de Jérusalem. Et ici, donc, nous gardons les coutumes juives et israélites les plus anciennes dans le monde entier. Vous voyez trois couleurs, le rouge, le noir et le blanc, normalement le blanc. Et ça, c'est la couleur de la tribu de Lévi. Donc, nous avons gardé ces couleurs depuis 3000 ans. Donc, voilà ça.
Pourquoi vous dites que vous êtes descendant de Juda?
Oui.
Est-ce qu'il y a des petites preuves?
Oui, nous sommes donc dans le village royal et sacré. Il y a plus de 400 tombeaux. Et c'est le nécropole juif.
Donc, ce sont les signes de tombeau royal, les petites maisons au-dessus des tombes.
Oui.
Parce que moi aussi, j'ai vu quelque chose comme ça dans l'Internet sur les tombeaux des Juifs en Israël, mais miniaturisés. Mais ce sont les mêmes.
Et là, je vais vous montrer donc des inscriptions hébraïques.
Ah, d'accord.
Vous avez ici
Magen David.
Oui, l'étoile de David. Et au-dessus, oui, il y a une icône. Non, il y a un I.
Israël.
C'est ça.
Ah, oui.
Voilà, c'est ça.
Et pourquoi ne vous convertissez pas?
Parce que nous sommes des descendants des Juifs biologiques 100%.
Donc, vous avez des preuves de tout ça?
Les Juifs en Israël, ils sont Juifs par la mère. Donc, ils sont des Juifs à 50%. Et nous, nos mères sont des Juifs, nos pères sont des Juifs biologiques, et nous sommes des Juifs biologiques à 100%.
The prince could not identify the age of the tombs and their inscriptions, and most academics agree that the island's first settlers arrived between 350 and 550 BC, centuries after the construction of the first temple of Jerusalem in the 10th century BC. But the prince remains among those on the island wholly convinced of their Jewish heritage. For believers, the proof lies in the similar appearance between the Malagasy people and the Sephardic Jews. The local language has similar sounding words, and they share some Jewish rituals like circumcision. This provides all the evidence they need. Asher regularly meets with other Jewish religious leaders. Tubi practices as an Orthodox Jew. And Petuela has been teaching Jewish history and Hebrew classes for the last 10 years.
Powerful information just brought out there. Hope you found it edifying. So this is here another excerpt from for Africa, containing of most use. it says that Judaism was the religion of the ancient Africans. So even before Christianity, our ancient customs aligned with the rituals and the way of worship of the ancient Israelites of the Old Testament. So I find this quite mind blowing and fascinating, of how Africa, a lot of the names, African names for the countries are of Hebrew origin. Also find it very interesting how the ancient burial sites of the royalty of Madagascar had Hebrew writings and Hebrew inscriptions on it, and also the menorah, as I just showed there. So all of this aligns with us as so-called colored people here in South Africa, as most of the slaves that were brought here to the Cape Colony were from Madagascar. So today's lesson specifically, we're just focusing on the Malagasy aspect of our slave ancestry, but um, all the people that were brought here as slaves specifically targeted is those in India and also Indonesia as well. Those people were Hebrews as well, Israelites as well. But for today, we're just focusing on the Malagasy aspect, as that is where majority of the slaves came from, especially to the Cape Colony. Yeah. So for me, this is quite mind blowing, and I'm just gonna show a picture now also here of girl in Puerto Rico, a Puerto Rican girl, also called colored woman, just to show you that this concept of colored is actually global, and all around the world, people of color who look like us in the Cape have all been called colored at one stage. It's just that in South Africa, we actually stuck with the term. But here's also a statesman, a a newspaper extract from from the Colorado Times, I think, and it speaks here of a colored Jew, a colored person being called a Jew. So this notion of so-called colored people being the real Jews and real Hebrews of the Bible is is actually factual, and there is tons of historical documentation to back this up. Now, this is also just speaking here of the Nama people as well, the legend of Haiti Hoab, saying here that within numerous Nama legends, there is one that has a curious similarity with the crossing of the Red Sea by Moses in his escape from Egypt. So we also see that in the folklore of the Khoi people. So specifically in this video, we're going to be speaking about the Khoi and the Malagasy. We definitely see that there are Hebrew traces and origins of those specific two bloodlines that so-called colored people descend from. So we do know that from the Khoi side, if you are a descendant of Khoi people, then you are most likely an Israelite, and also if you are a descendant of slaves or Malagasy slaves or any slaves that were brought to the Cape, you are also most likely an Israelite according to the Bible. So here it also speaks about the customs of the Khoi people aligning with those of the Jews, including circumcision, including our sacrificial rites, and also our new all of moon these things festivals as point well to an ancient Israelite origin, as the laws, statutes, and commandments was only given to Israel and made known to the children of Israel. And here's also in archaeology what the ancient Hebrews look like as well. We saw that they wore shaped dresses like African type pattern clothing, and they were brown skinned with afros. We also still do see that in the Nama culture and many of the Khoi tribes, and also other Southern African tribes, they all still do wear multicolored clothing and dresses, and those similar type of patterns as well. So here's just to show you that yes, indeed, Table Bay was a slave port. And this here is also from a page in the Royal African Journal, I think it's of England, if I'm not mistaken. It says here that the subcontinent, especially those of an earlier period, can hardly have failed to have been impressed from time to time with the evidence of Semitic or Judaic influence amongst the natives. So even here, if you read further, it confesses that many explorers confess to the fact that there are Judaic customs and Hebraic customs amongst the people of southern Africa. So we're going to look here at Ezekiel chapter 34 verse 6. It says, "My sheep wandered through all the mountains and upon every high hill. Yea, my flock was scattered upon all the face of the earth, and none did search for them or seek after them." So this is a prophecy of the Israelites speaking of how we would be scattered over all the earth. So, this has only happened to one group of people all throughout history. And just here's a picture also of the global slave trade, just demonstrating the reality of the verse we just read before this, how the flock of the Most High would be scattered over all the earth. And this is exactly how we were scattered all over the earth through slave ships. So this is how we can see that the Bible is an actual, real, historical account of everything that has happened throughout history, has all been prophesied by the Most High, because He is the author and everything is in His hands. So I just want to bring out another precept here in the book of Baruch, chapter 2, from verse 1. "Therefore YAHUAH hath made good His word, which He pronounced against us and against our judges that judged Israel, and against our kings and against our princes and against the men of Israel and Judah, to bring upon us great plagues such as never happened under the whole heaven, as it came to pass in Jerusalem according to the things that were written in the law of Moses." So here the prophet is saying that the things and the plagues that have been brought upon Israel are things that have never been done under heaven to any other nation. So here's also a UNESCO website speaking of the transatlantic slave trade, which we are descendants of, saying that the transatlantic slave trade was regarded as the world's first global system. So there's also a fulfillment of prophecy speaking of as it has never been done under heaven. So with that, I just want to give all glory and praises to the Most High YAHUAH. I hope you guys found this lesson edifying, and with that I say shalom.
I pray you remember this, to pray for the poor that only pray for a little bit, that beg at the master's table to nibble a bit. It's for my dogs on the corner scrapping for kibbles and bits. I pray for deliverance, I pray that I enter in, I pray that you root for me the pride that's deep within. I pray you shine a light on what's inside to see within. Could be a seed of Shem, otherwise a seed of sin. I pray for the weak to overcome what's grieving them. I pray for the meek that's overrun by deviance. Used to be loud like a muffler, wild, had to buckle up at supersonic speeds, beat them down with them knuckles up. Skipping 9 to 5, I was proud as a hustler, learned the highest name, now I'm on the up and up. I pray to share a cup with my Savior, well a couple of them, Passover, everlasting life, Last Supper.